So the next thing we'll talk about is some of the prerequisites and considerations whenever you're planning for replicator installation and actually installing the product. Okay. So any server where the web application services are running, our solutions are going to get installed, and we're going to consider that a replication server. So whether it's an app server, index server, search server, anything that has those web application services running, whether or not the end user can hit it, we are going to install our solutions and consider that an actual replication server. Okay. Now, you can run the engine on one server in the farm or multiple servers in the farm, depending on how you want to, depending on your license and depending on how you want to have that set up. So some of the key things to think about: permissions. So whenever we're talking between web applications, we use NTLM authentication. So if your web applications are using anonymous or forms or any other type of authentication, you'll need to extend the web app for Replicator to be able to communicate back and forth between farms on. Okay. You also need to know the farm account password, and whenever you're doing the install, you need to be doing that install as a user that has local administrative rights. Okay. For disk space, everything by default is going to the C drive. So out of the box, if you just pick next, 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 you're going to have everything pointing to your C drive. That's usually not a problem if you have a lot of space on your C drive. But because we use we use the farm account whenever we're creating packages, pasting packages, it actually uses that farm account's temp directory. So something to keep in mind is if you're limited on space on your C drive, you want the install there, you want to make sure that you actually update that farm account's temp drive to be pointing to another drive that has a little bit more space than what C normally has. Okay, some considerations for our replicator database is we don't need to have anything but simple logging in those SQL databases. There's no reason to keep a big transaction log, so you can switch those replicator databases to simple mode. It'll keep the log file from growing. And there's no real need for backing up the replicator databases. And why? Why is that? It's because of the nature of replicator. Take, for example, if your farm went down and your backups were 3 or 4 days old, what's currently in the replicator databases is not going to be valid for a backup that's 3 or 4 days old because it's current and it's event-based. So you need to basically, if you have a disaster, you would bring up the farm with the backups that you have, and you would basically want to reconfigure Replicator at that point. There are methods to save your configuration for Replicator, which we'll cover, I believe, like in day 4. Okay. All right. So the other thing to think about, HTTP ports. So we only communicate over HTTP or HTTPS. So there's no other ports that need to be open other than the web application ports that you're going to need to communicate with the web applications on the other side. Okay. In firewalled mode, that means you have to have those ports open at least one way. So Replicator can actually talk through a firewall one way, which is perfect for the intranet, extranet scenario. What ends up happening is one farm does all the work. It both pushes and pulls data through that firewall. Okay. All right. So some of the other things here. And we talk about, we have another feature that we leverage as well, which is remote differential compression. We actually call it DC, and it's also a Windows feature. And what this Windows feature allows you to do is use block level differencing. So instead of sending an entire PowerPoint file, for example, if you've only changed one slide, then it'll do a differencing, it'll do a comparison on source and destination, and it's only going to send over what's different. So we make use of that technology. Whenever you're doing your initial synchronization, we recommend the method that you use is a backup and restore. It's just faster and cleaner rather than sending, if you have huge databases like a terabyte, trying to send that all over a network connection can be slow, because remember, Replicator's not copying just a file. It's calling into the API. So whenever we send something over the wire, it's not like grabbing a document and dragging it to the destination. It's not the same thing at all. We're asking the SharePoint API for that document object. We're packaging that up. That's going to the destination. It's being unpacked, and it's being given back to the SharePoint API to put back into SharePoint on the other side. That's why it's faster to do that backup restore than trying to push everything through the API. Okay. Some of the things you need to know about customizations, definitely custom solutions. They need to be installed on both sides. They may or may not work. So you need to test this out in a test environment. If you have custom solutions built, if you have third-party applications installed, if you have workflows you've developed outside of SharePoint. All of these things need to be tested up front so that you know what's going to work, what's not going to work, and we can have a chance to work with you to see if there's anything that we can do to help out in getting these working for you. Okay. And you have to have your alternate access mappings and DNS configurations set up. A lot of times during installation, this is a stumbling block just because some of these simple things aren't quite set up right between the servers. And just a quick note on resources. There's lots of documentation out there. We have a quick start guide, the advanced install guide, the evaluation guide, our reference guide, and of course there's a knowledge base which is available to you through our support portal. And there's also a search now, so you can actually search all of the tickets that have been opened and closed to see resolutions. So we do have lots of resources to try and help you out as we go. And I believe I am now going to pass this back over Adam to talk about the life cycle.